Welcome back to the Nick Taylor Horror Show. As always, each episode of the Nick Taylor Horror Show explores and deconstructs the success strategies of established horror directors while summarizing the key insights and resources that you can use on your own horror filmmaking journey. This includes their creative processes, strategies for getting their films off the ground, favorite books and tools, key life lessons, and so much more. Today, we have Tommy Stovall on the show. Tommy's an American writer, director, and producer. He's directed multiple films, including Hate Crime, Aaron's Blood, Sedona, and his newest horror thriller, Room for Rent, starring the iconic Lin Shaye. I had a really great time speaking to him about making his latest movie and his advice for aspiring indie filmmakers. Without further ado, here is Tommy Stovall. So how did you first come to start directing? What was the beginning, and how did you find your way to become a director?
Well, I actually started with a video camera when I was in high school as a teenager back in the 80s. And it wasn't something that I thought I would ever do for real. It was just something I did for fun. Mm-hmm. I would get some friends and my brother, and we would just take the video camera out and start making up movies as we went along. And I learned how to edit stuff, and I enjoyed that. And it was just a hobby back then. And then when I was in college, it kind of dawned on me the idea of trying it out, as an independent filmmaker. And I ended up majoring in that in college, in radio, TV, and film. And I ended up with a video production company where I videotaped pretty much everything for whatever they would pay me for. And but I always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to try independent film. And especially during the 90s when a lot of good indie films were coming out and becoming more popular, and I felt like I really wanted to give it a shot. And back then it was still pretty expensive, and so that was the biggest hurdle, I think. And making a film was just the cost. And as the cost kept coming down, we figured out a way to raise some money and make a pretty good film. And finally, I just, I took a couple of screenwriting seminars and read some books on screenwriting, and wrote a script. And that's just kind of how it started. And I gave it a shot and pretty much learned everything by doing it.
Right.
Because you can't really learn unless you do it. Yeah. We had so much fun. I just wanted to keep doing it. So that's how it all kind of got started.
What were some of the keys to getting your first movie off the ground? I mean, for people who have the script and have the great idea and want to make it happen, but don't know how to get financing and don't know, what their first step is. What would be your advice for people in that scenario?
Well, nowadays, back then I decided to write a script because I had no idea how to find a script. Now it's easier to find scripts, if that's not something you want to do. And there's a lot of good scripts out there. In fact, Room for Rent was a script I found online.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, from another writer.
Oh, wow.
And it was the first film I've done where I haven't written the script. Mm-hmm. And but back when I got started, they didn't have these sites like Inktip, where people post their scripts and producers can look at them. And so that's a great resource right there. But as far as, filmmaking, directing, even if you have no money, it doesn't stop you from going out and trying something. We were fortunate that we found, with my first film, we found some really good actors, and that was something that I didn't really expect. And that's something to think about for other filmmakers too. I expected to go out. We filmed my first film in Dallas, Texas, where I used to live. And I thought we would just go there. We would find some local actors, some local crew, and just make the movie. And, we raised some money from, people we knew, some friends and family. And it was a very low budget, of course. And luckily I got introduced to this casting director who lived in LA. And 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 the person who introduced me said, you just give the script to her. She might be interested in helping you with it. And she read the script, liked it. And before you knew it, within a couple of days, she had sent the script out to agents, and she got tons of these responses from agents.
Wow.
For their actors who wanted to audition for this film. And these were people, well-known actors that I knew. I've seen them. I knew who they were.
Yeah.
And I was just floored. I was shocked. I had no idea that, we even had access to this kind of talent. And what I found was that a lot of these actors, they're always just wanting to work, and a lot of them love to find new talent, new directors to work with. And, and they know going into it, they have no idea if this person's going to be good or not. But they love what they do, and they'll give it a shot oftentimes, especially if it's a good script or a project they believe in. And so that was kind of how it happened. And I all of a sudden I ended up, Lin Shaye was in my first film as well. She was one of the actors that I had in my first film. And, and I still can't believe that we got the cast that we got, but I, other directors have done the same thing. And so, you never know, shoot for the moon is what I say. And so find someone, and, and now you can you can go on IMDb and call an actor's agent, say, I've got this script, and, a lot of times, the agent will be open to talking to you. And if you have an actor who is talented and well-known and has a pretty good resume, that makes it easier to raise the money as well. Mm-hmm. And so you just gotta, one of the things I learned, and what I say a lot, is you have to really learn to take no a lot of times for an answer, but you have to keep going. You gotta just ignore that, because you're going to get no, 100 times more than you get yes in this business. And whether it's, asking actors to be in your project, or whether it's asking people for if they want to invest in your film. But you just got to keep going. You can't let that stop you. And, I, over my 4 films that I've done, I've asked a lot of actors to be in the film, and they've said no as well. And, and it's disappointing, but, you always find, it always works out. You find someone who will do it, and it's always better to have someone who's excited about doing it. And so I don't know. It's just, I just say, just do it. That's what you got to do. Just got to go out there and do it.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And the idea that actors are just ready to work and they're excited by new voices and new projects, and they're not necessarily motivated by big studios or by big budgets. I think that's something a lot of independent filmmakers don't consider. And also, if there's an actor who's on a TV show or something and they're not the main star, but everybody thinks they're promising, if you put them front and center in your movie, that is very appealing to certain actors as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, just for instance, Lin Shaye, who I've worked with 3 times, fortunately for me, she just likes to work.
Yeah.
She loves what she does. She loves acting. She loves independent film. A lot of actors are very supportive of independent film. And you just never know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I dive in right into Room for Rent. It was great to see her as a protagonist and to see how chilling she can perform. I mean, that was such a good performance. That was really, really fantastic.
Yeah, thank you for that. I agree. That was, when I read the script, I immediately thought of her. And one of the things, just like you said, you don't get to see her as a protagonist, as the main character a lot. She's a scene stealer. She's always the most memorable in whatever scene she's in, because she's so terrific. But as just as a fan of hers, I thought I would like to see her in a leading role like this, and I figured a lot of her fans would as well, and I just thought it was a great character for her to sink her teeth into, and luckily, she ended up saying yes, and she just really threw everything she had into it.
Yeah. No, it totally seemed like it. I mean, for a character to go on such an emotional roller coaster, and she doesn't skip a beat. I mean, she's so compelling, and it's very tragic in moments and then very chilling at other moments. And having grown up seeing so many of her movies, it feels like you're watching a family member is having a mental breakdown. What was the collaborative process like working with her? I mean, how were you able to help her build that character and find her vulnerability and then find her complete and total utter insanity?
Yeah, well, that's, I have to give her a lot of credit. We worked on the film, the script and the character for a few months before we started shooting, actually. She is one of these actresses that really dives deep into her character's backstory. Even the other films that I did with her, she did the same thing, and they were much smaller roles, but she really goes into the character's backstory, and she is one of the most thorough actors I've ever worked with, as far as figuring out the character's motivations and why they say what they say and why they do what they do, and she, with this film, she just tried to come up with what would make this interesting as a character and as a film, and she put so many more layers on the character than what was originally written. Joyce, the character she plays, goes through a much larger transformation throughout the film than we had originally envisioned, and it makes it so much more interesting. She starts off as this timid, seemingly simple character, and just the arc goes from there, and she ends up transforming into this totally different person. Even with the clothing she wears in the film, she came up with this idea of this clothing arc, and it's so and it was just brilliant, and it's such a big part of the character, and it helps you see this character transform as the movie goes on, and and it makes you kind of go into her world and what she's thinking, and her what she's fantasizing about, and it was just so much fun. We talked once or twice a week, like I said, for a few months, and she would come up with these ideas, and she would call, and she would be so excited. Oh, I thought of this, and I thought, and I said, oh, that sounds great. We should do that. And by the time we started filming, she knew exactly how she was going to approach every scene. And it was just, she's just great to work with.
Yeah.
She, like I said, she puts everything she has into it, and she's just professional and fun to be around. And it was a lot of fun.
That's great. Did you guys consult any actual true cases, either of Airbnb psycho issues, or people in similar scenarios as her character who were just having these murderous nervous breakdowns? Did you consult any actual cases of anything to inspire the acting or the movie?
Not really. I read a couple of things, but I hadn't known of any really severe cases like this with a B&B, or I hadn't heard of anything like that. I had my own weird situation once with a B&B, but it was just kind of an awkward thing. It wasn't scary or anything. So I knew how, when you're renting a place from someone like that, you don't really know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
You can look at pictures on the internet and read reviews, but until you're there, you don't really know what you're going into. And I thought that was always something to think about anyway. At least be aware and know something about this person you're renting from.
Yeah, I always thought it was a great idea for a horror movie is to do an Airbnb kind of horror movie. Like, you check into a place, you don't know the person, but there's this culture of trust. Similar with Uber, there should be like a rideshare horror movie as well. I always thought it was really ripe, relevant material for that lends itself to horror, because it's all just based on trust. Whereas, what if you put too much trust in somebody and they are not exactly trustworthy? Put yourself in a pretty vulnerable spot. Yeah.
Yeah, but we know so many people, especially where I live. So many people are renting their places out on Airbnb, and it's just this thing. It's just this craze that's been going on, and You got to think about that too when you're renting your place to someone you don't know they're coming in, and it's a weird kind of thing when you think about it.
One thing I noticed about the movie is it's very expertly paced. I mean, it's a slow burn, and sometimes slow burns can tend to be, kind of boring, but it just kept building and building and building, and then it would throw these little uncomfortable curveballs, and it was constantly entertaining while also building to just like a slow burning to a complete and total boil. I was wondering how conscious that was and how you approached the overall pacing of the movie.
Well, a lot of that had to do, that was in the editing process. You tend to, when you start editing a film, you tend to put pretty much everything in there, and the film is always way too long.
Right.
The first, and it's something I just, I really try to be mindful of this time. I go back and watch my other films, and I always look at stuff, how that could have been edited better, and we should have done this on that or whatever. And I really tried, especially since this is, like you said, a slow burn thriller, I really tried to get the pacing right. And I thank you for saying that. I'm glad to hear that, because that's something we worked on. Originally the beginning of the movie, especially, that, there were a lot of brilliant things Lin did that we had in the movie. And she, and we ended up taking it out just because, of the pacing. And a lot of times you hate to take stuff out, because sometimes, an actor is just so great in the moment or whatever. And really, I tried to make pacing the first priority here. And so, I really tried to tell myself, look, it doesn't matter if, this thing may be brilliant, but if it slows the movie down, we got to take it out.
Kill your darlings.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something you learn to do more and more as you go along. When you first start out, that's something you're very, very hard to do.
Yeah.
But when you're making films, you learn everything. Every time you make a film, you learn from it, and that's something I really tried to learn from. And we had some test screenings with audiences, and we're able to see how people were responding with the pacing and so on. And so we just tried to get it right. And, you try to make it a little more fast paced as the movie goes along. And so we just, something you don't really know until you start editing, putting stuff together. And so, that's something that I'm really kind of proud of in that, because we've got a lot of positive response in that aspect.
Cool. That's great. So as one thing I'm always fascinated by with directors and writers is, how do you capture your ideas? Are you a notebook guy? Do you use something like Evernote? I mean, because you must just constantly throughout the day have ideas about little details or movie ideas. How do you capture it all and organize it in one place so that when it comes time to do a movie or to sit down and write a movie, you can access all of these just kind of random thoughts and, ideas that you've had?
I just keep a notepad. It's that simple. I keep a notepad by my bed, on my nightstand, because more often than not, I'll get most of my ideas when I'm trying to go to sleep. Or I'll even wake up in the middle of the night with an idea, and if I don't write it down, I'll forget it. So I keep a notepad right there so I can write things down. And I just, I'll have pages and pages of notes. And when I'm writing a script or developing a script, I'll just keep a running notepad, and then copy stuff over when I check off certain things. And because you do forget stuff, and so I try to go back and read stuff that I totally forgot that I had written down, and I'm like, wow, that was brilliant. I'm glad I thought of that.
Cool. So seeing the movie in its finished form, what would you have invested more in, and what would you have invested less in? I don't necessarily mean money. It can be time, energy, resources, what have you, but what would you have invested more in, and what would you have invested less in?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say what you would have invested more in, because if I had the money and resources, I would have invested a lot more in pretty much every aspect.
Right.
The biggest challenge really is time, especially when you're working with a small crew. A there are a lot of good things with a small crew, as far as being able to get things done and being creative and all that. But you're constantly going. Everybody's doing something all the time, and you're trying to make your day. You're trying to make the schedule, and you don't have a lot of time for a lot of takes on each scene. And so you're just trying to finish the day. And so that's the main thing. More money always helps.
Yeah.
And really, what it gives you is time. It gives you time and resources. But you always look back and there's always some waste in a film production, and every film we've done, we've been able to lessen that to a certain extent, because you learn, and so a lot of times you go back and say, oh, we didn't need to spend money on that, or we didn't need to spend time on that, and
right.
Thinking about this project, we did pretty good. There wasn't a lot of wasted time, and and the main thing we try to do is have fun. Hopefully, that's the thing that keeps me coming back. You have fun and you like the people you work with, and but that's just something you're constantly thinking about. As a producer, you're constantly thinking about spending your resources where they're most valuable.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think you mentioned fun being a really important part of the process. And particularly with independent filmmaking, it's so important to keep that crew motivated and to have a set that's relatively fun, but it can't be too fun because then they start to slack off. So I'm curious as to how you're able to kind of establish that balance where people are there and they enjoy being on set, but they're motivated to do their best work. Because it's a challenge for a lot of directors who are independent and don't have those insane Hollywood $50 million budgets.
Right. Well, you're right. That's another challenge. When you're not paying someone what they're normally paid, or sometimes it's hard, to keep them motivated. But luckily, we've been able to work with people who really enjoy doing it. We did the film we did before this, pretty much almost the entire crew were film students who had just graduated from film school.
Oh, wow.
And that was probably the most fun project I've done.
Really?
Because they were so positive and so eager and so excited to be working on a feature film that every day they were just happy all the time.
That's cool.
And it was so much fun. And I think people who probably have worked in the business longer, aren't like that.
Right.
Fun. It's more motivated by a paycheck, but also, you want people to be motivated by the excitement of doing it, because they're going to bring more to the project. It's like when you're casting, I always look and see, which actor is really, really motivated to do this.
Yeah.
How passionate are they about this? And a lot of times it's someone you may not have thought about originally, but because of their passion for the project and for the character or whatever, they're going to put everything they have into it and probably give you a better performance. And it's the same thing with crew, and you try to, you have to be nice to the crew. You have to treat them well. You have to, have plenty of snacks around the set all the time and feed them well. And, they're just something, which, I think is just obvious. And, and just, you try to keep it fun. It's a small family that kind of is, it's a temporary family every time you do a movie. And, so you try to keep the drama to a minimum, that's for sure.
So hiring a crew of mostly college kids, is that or recent college grads, is that a move that you would recommend? It sounds like you had a lot of fun.
I guess it depends on who it is. These guys were very, very talented. And we had a film school where I live that was very hands-on, and they had all this state-of-the-art equipment. And so all these guys learned filmmaking by using all this equipment, and they, had pretty much done every every crew position on the crew at one time or another. And they were the type of people that they would just go out like I used to do for fun and make stuff. You know, they're not getting paid or anything. They just go out. They're making stuff. They want to get into the business, and they just did it because of the passion. It's just what they love to do, and that makes such a difference. And it was like I said, it was just the enthusiasm was just amazing.
Right. It sounds like that makes all the difference in the world. You had mentioned that you'd taken some screenwriting seminars and things like that. So I feel like the entire filmmaking industry, there's so many books and so many courses, and there's a lot of bullshit in that market. But it sounds like these courses were formidable for you. Were there any other either courses or books that were particularly helpful for you, either creatively or in terms of the business of film, that contributed to your career?
I mean, like I said, you don't really learn until you actually do it. That's the best way to learn. I read a couple of screenwriting books just on the technical part of it, just how a script is formatted. But I'm not sure that's something you can really be taught until you try it, and you read a lot of scripts and so on. And but there's one book that I would recommend to any director or filmmaker who wants to direct. And this is a book that my first film, we had this amazing first first assistant director. And, he knew it was my first film, and I had no idea what I was getting into. And he had been in the business a while. And he gave me this book during pre-production. It was called Directing Actors. And I read the book before we started shooting, while we were in pre-production, and it was just so valuable because
Really?
I hadn't worked with actors on that level before, and that's something I was just going in totally blind. And whether you've worked with actors or not, it would be something valuable to read. But I'll never forget that was such a huge help, and that's probably the most helpful book I've ever read.
Okay, great. So what are you working on next?
I have a couple of projects kind of on the back burner. One is called Condition of Return. We're trying to raise some money, and not sure when we want to start filming or get going on it, but we're hoping to get, we're in development with it and hoping to get going soon. And it's another psychological thriller type film. And then I have another one kind of in my head that I want to start writing a script for, and you just never know. I want to keep going. You try to keep going, and it's just timing is always an issue, and money's always an issue, and so who knows? We'll just keep plodding along, and hopefully it'll happen soon.
I gotcha. Oh, and I'd forgotten to ask. I mean, you've shot a number of movies in Arizona, specifically Sedona. Other than just the sheer beauty of that location and the high production value that alone offers, are there any other major benefits in shooting in Arizona, or do you just kind of like it?
Well, the biggest benefit is it's convenient because I live here.
Well, there's that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So that's the reason. And the second film we made was called Sedona, about Sedona. So obviously that, we wanted to film that here. But that's pretty much it. It's always more challenging when you have to travel, and, it costs more money to put yourself up in a hotel and all that. But yeah, it's just convenience. And it's a great place to be and film. And like you said, it's, great backdrop, and people like, that's another thing, people like working here, it's easier to get actors and crew to come out here to play around and make a film than, some other places. So
that makes sense. Cool. Okay, great. Well, Tommy, I really, really appreciate the time. Thank you. And huge congratulations. Room for Rent. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed it a lot.
Well, thank you.
Any parting advice for aspiring filmmakers?
Like I said, it's, there was a point where it had taken me a few years where I kept, saying I wanted to do a film, someday. And I got to the point where I said, if I never try, I will always regret it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what kind of motivated me to take the plunge. Like I said, I didn't know what I was getting into, and I knew it could be a total disaster, but I knew that if I never tried, I would regret it.
Yeah.
And so just, think you got to have that attitude, I think. And like I said, you just go out and do it, and you're going to make mistakes. You're going to learn from the mistakes, and you're going to be better next time. And just do it, and just always remember to have fun, because that's why you do it. At least that's why I do it.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to keep doing it. So just, go out there and give it a shot. That's really all I can say.
Great. All right. Well, on that note, Tommy, thank you again. This was a lot of fun, super informative. I really appreciate the time. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
All right, what a great conversation. So as always, here are my key takeaways from this conversation with Tommy Stovall. Number 1, aim high when casting. When making a low-budget movie, the performances will make or break the film, which makes good casting critical. But the fact still remains, good actors are typically more expensive. So what do you do? Tommy had worked with Lin Shaye in the past, but was able to get her as his lead for Room for Rent because he gave her the opportunity to collaborate closely with him and craft her character around what she was most interested in doing as an actor. Many directors have spoken about this little casting hack, where you can attract great actors by giving them the opportunity to craft the script and character around their strengths and interests. A lot of very good actors just want to work, and if your script is solid and you give them an opportunity to either extend their range or do something they've never done, you have a very decent shot at getting well-known names. You're obviously not going to get Brad Pitt this way, but that supporting character on that TV show you really like, who you always thought could carry a movie, might be a very realistic option. Mark Duplass has an excellent speech that outlines this same strategy. Check it out on YouTube. It's called The Cavalry is Not Coming. He filmed it at South by Southwest a few years ago. It's about an hour long, but I highly recommend watching or listening to the entire thing. Number 2, get used to no. It's very cliche, but deserves to be repeated. Tommy, like most directors, wasn't handed a movie to direct. He had to fight for it and work through multiple rejections before he was ever given an opportunity. Directing ain't for sissies. Thick skin and a never-give-up attitude is required. Additionally, it's important to not hear no, but instead hear not now, as many producers will initially pass on a project, then jump on board later down the line. Listen to my interview with William Lustig for more on this. Number 3, perfectionism is the enemy. Take the plunge. A lot of would-be directors are paralyzed by their own perfection and someday approach to filmmaking. As Tony Robbins says, the road to someday leads to the town of never. I might be paraphrasing just a bit, but many people don't fully comprehend that hands-on real experience is the only way to become a good director, not by planning, attending film school, reading books, or researching, even though these things are all very important. But if you're not 100% sure of your script or your approach or whether or not you really know what you're doing, Tommy recommends that you get out there and make your film anyway, so you can make your mistakes, fail upwards, and get better. Anyway, guys, thank you again as always for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to me if you shared it with your friends, family, and colleagues on social media. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And thank you again for listening to the Nick Taylor Horror Show.